What up, what up, what up, everybody in Chicago? This is the Spawn of Me podcast. I'm your host, Khalif Adams. What is the deal? I hope that you are all doing extremely well. I hope your life is treating you well. I think the people around you are treating you well. I hope the universe is treating you well. I hope that everything is going awesomely for you all at home. Thank you for coming and rocking with us this week and every week on the Spawn of Me podcast. We have a banger of a show tonight. I am super happy to bring on our guest. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to everyone who listened to last week's show. As usual, we had a fantastic time hanging out and getting it all in. It's always fun to be able to chop it up about stories of the day and make sure that we are kind of holding people's feet to the fire when we have our conversations. So it is always wonderful to all have you here with us doing that work and making sure that we bring dopeness everywhere that we go. So we have an awesome guest with us this week. So awesome that I had to break out some Dilla music to make it real, because if I didn't, it wouldn't feel like it would bring this man's dopeness to its full capacity. Let me know if you can hear this in the chat. We have New York Video Game Critics Award winner, head of animation over at the Patriot Act show, Netflix's Patriot Act show. We have my man, my mellow, the smoothest kind of fellow. We have Yussef Cole on the show with us this week. Shout out to you, Yussef. What's good? How are you doing this week?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Khalif. It's a pleasure.
Dude, I'm so hyped. I'm so hyped to have you rock with us. I am extremely excited to be able to have you on the show as a person who I've admired for a very long time, who's doing fantastic work in all the spaces that you inhabit. Dude, first of all, thank you for coming onto the show.
My pleasure.
I'm extremely excited to have you. One of the things that I want to talk about first is just how are you? How is everything going? Is everything cool? Is everything dope?
Yeah, dude. Everything's good. Yeah, everything is going well. The show is in its fourth cycle, which is like their cycles of 6 episodes, so they're not really like seasons, they're more like cycles. We come up with a new word for it because it's shorter than normal. But yeah, we're trucking along. I've been there for a year now, and it's good. You know, like it's busy, it's hectic, there's a lot to do, but you know, the fruits of our labor are there, you know, for anyone to see, and as long as Netflix is around, then it'll stay there. That's a good feeling to have, because you know a lot of my previous work at least in motion graphics is pretty ephemeral, because working on commercials that come and go. So it's nice to work on a creative show like this that also has some staying power, you know, and it can sit up there for as long as it needs to, as a reference for all the subjects that we try and cover. Yeah, we're gonna definitely dig specifically into the work you've been doing on Patriot Act, but I want to start out at the beginning. Sure.
I want to go to the years of young Yussef, who's in the Bronx, in the BX. Did you grow up in? You grew up in the BX, correct?
I grew up in the Bronx. Yeah.
What part of the Bronx are you from?
I am from Kingsbridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm off the one line, basically like second to last stop. Like I'm way up there, but. You know, I'm still living in the same neighborhood, and I mean, I moved around, like, but I am still where I grew up. Yeah, I'm living where I grew up now, which is great.
Nice.
And
nice.
It's funny, like my wife always makes fun of me because she grew up in Flushing, and she's like, you think you always pretend you grew up in like a tough area, but like. It's nothing compared to where I grew up. So we have like a battle of hardships. I was like, I got mugged, okay? Like somebody stole my bike. And she's like, but it was just bullies. They weren't actually like, it was just like bully kids stealing your bike to like piss you off. It wasn't like, you know, life or death mugging. So we're just like always comparing our childhood toughness, basically our toughness ratio.
It's like I fought people too when I was growing up. I know how it's like. I know what it's like to fight people.
Exactly. Yeah.
I grew up in the Northeast Bronx.
Oh yeah.
So I was across the way on the in the toughest train stop of all sounding train stops I was on the 2 and the 5 on the Gun Hill Road side of the Bronx.
The Hill of Guns.
Hill of Guns.
I grew up there a little bit. Like, I forget the train stop because I was too young. Like, I left when I was like 4 or 5. But yeah, we had like a house there, like in the Gun Hill Road area, like right around there. And it was. We still went back. We still go back there, like, because we have family. But my parents moved on to the west. The west side. The west side. The one. I dig it. IRT.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's one of those things, though, right? When you're from the Bronx, there is a very much like I need to hold on to a little bit of my Bronxness wherever I go, because it is a place that does, get you ready for the world at large in many, many ways. It kind of sets you up to understand the world around you in ways that I don't think a lot of people outside of the New York City area kind of understand.
I think you're right.
What was it like?
You got a chip
what was
on
it
your
like
shoulder.
growing up? Yeah, you kind of have your radar on all the time, right? Like, your radar is very, very keen to everything that's happening around you when everything is, even when things are fairly just chill, but your radar is kind of always up. Did growing up in the Bronx like affect, or did it influence, the kind of steps and routes that you've gone through to get to, where you are now professionally in any way? Do you feel like that has like enabled you or emboldened you in some ways to do that?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that it left an imprint and guided where I am now. Like, I'm from, I feel of the Bronx. I feel loyal to this neighborhood and this borough. I also feel that it's hard to really compute like everything, how it actually affected me. I think my parents probably played a bigger part in terms of forcing me to go down certain paths, or supporting my reading, or being kind of a nerd when I was a kid. Because I remember definitely like being out of place at my school because I was such a nerd and just not fitting in at all. Like, I always felt a little bit like not in that, like I couldn't fully earn that Bronxness somehow. Like, there was a little bit of that outsiderness. And part of that just, I don't know, because my parents are maybe different because they're not from this neighborhood, and like my mom's from Tunisia, so she has that immigrant upbringing that she brought out in me. But also, it's kind of how much of that is actually like legitimate, because being from the Bronx, any kind of person can come from the Bronx. There's a stereotype of like the toughness of what the Bronx is, but I think that's obviously just, you want to live up to that, but you don't have to. Like, and it's kind of better not to. Like, you should follow your own path, and that's something that my parents pushed me to do. So I think I owe it to them that I followed my path and didn't feel like I needed to like represent some different image of what growing up here would be like. So I definitely feel it in my roots, and I feel like I'm indebted to it, but also I feel very much an individual who grew up in the Bronx,
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you are similar.
Yeah, there are like cultural touchstones that come from the Bronx that make you, feel really attuned to not only the city, but to that toughness that goes along with it, right? It's like, wherever I go, it is very interesting to see the reception that I get, or the reaction that I get when there are people like, "Hey, where are you from?" And I'm like, "I'm from the Bronx." And I say it with pride because it's a prideful feeling that I have. Yeah. But their face always kind of tunes in this way that is like, "And you made it out alive?" Like, how did you make it out alive? Like, it's like that weird, like, everyone swears that the Bronx was and still is in this like Bronx is burning era. Like, it's still like in the 80s and 70s when it comes to,
it's kind of funny,
safety and all that stuff.
That's the era that like it established it, especially because that group, gave birth to hip hop, and that became the cultural touchstone that spread out to everywhere else. But pretty much our generation grew up after that, and in different circumstances. And so it's totally like the difference is very stark. But it's also cool and interesting having family that grew up in that era and like in those areas. Like, my dad's side of the family is all from the Gun Hill area and grew up, like around buildings that were set on fire by landlords and like just giant empty lots, and they remembered all this. I remember we watched an episode of like The Get Down or whatever, that Netflix hip hop show, and they're like, "Yep, this looks right." Like they were just burnt out city blocks, and I was like, "Damn, this is kind of the first time I really talked to them about that." Like they just
that's so interesting
because they never really talked about it before. Like, and a lot of the family moved up to Co-op City, like at some point.
Yeah. I went to school in Co-op City. I went to Truman High School.
Nice.
Co-op City,
yeah.
So it's like
you're familiar with that.
That is also a very interesting part of the Bronx in and of itself.
The whole area, like no one, like I feel like most people, even in New York, don't understand how weird it is because it's like Co-op City is like. You go like I'll go to my uncle's apartment, like way up, like a 50th floor or whatever, and you're like, well, I'm like in a skyscraper overlooking the Atlantic, and then you go a few more miles, you're on City Island, which is totally like its own like city town that feels like nothing else in New York. Like, it's crazy. I think, and it's hard to get to, so most people don't head out there, but. I was trying to get my friends.
You felt fancy. You felt fancy when you went to City Island. You're like, ooh, we're going to go out to eat. We're going to go to City Island and go eat.
It's like highbrow, lowbrow.
It's like, it's totally like we have our own post office and we also have nutcrackers. It's all the things that you can possibly get in one particular place. But it always used to make me laugh about Co-op City real quick before we shift gears. How everyone was super excited and repped their section.
Sure.
That was the thing that everyone cared about. They were like, "Yo, what section are you from?" "Oh, I'm from Section 5. "Oh no, I'm from Section 2. We have beef."
It
was interesting to see the we don't talk to them. It's turf wars within the whole.
We have it where we're like, you're in the elevator bank that goes from 11 to 20. I'm in the elevator bank that goes from 1 to 15.
It's kind of like
never
that,
the twain shall meet.
Totally weird. Anyway. Where did your love for games come from? Were you gaming early? Was it a thing that you always had access to, or was it something that you found later on in your life?
I was definitely gaming pretty early on. We got like a Nintendo a year or so after it came out. So it was like the late 80s. And me and my little brother, we would just play, get that Nintendo and play that Mario, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade. That was our first big gaming console experience. Like we'd play that, and then we just kept on with it. And I've been gaming in some capacity since then. Like, took a break in college, like wanted to socialize and try something different. But then afterward, I was like, that was dumb. Let's go back to games.
It's like games are dope. I think I like these. They're pretty good.
And it was like also like coming back in graduating and being able to make money and buy games and buy consoles and stuff was a totally different thing, than begging your parents for a game every few months or year or whatever. So that was an extra like added allure to like getting back into games, right? You like buy whatever you wanted and like play it whenever you wanted or whatever. So so I've been playing since then, since the NES.
Did you have a favorite or any couple of favorites that were the ones that when you think about that time and that era that you kind of harken back to?
Yeah, I mean, like there are a lot. I think like the most formative years were the PS1 years because I'm not sure why. Like I think it was just like it was like high school or early high, maybe early high school or middle school, and just getting really into it, playing with my brother, and just like getting into certain games like Jet Moto, which was their like version of Wave Racer, and Metal Gear Solid, and just like games that were before that they were still kind of limited in how immersive or detailed they could get, and then PS1 kind of blew the lid off of that, and I felt I had so much greater like a level of investment because the games were so much more dynamic, And Twisted Metal 2, oh my god, we played so many hours of Twisted Metal 2.
Oh man, Twisted Metal was so good,
so good. And that was like,
man,
we just had neighbors like in our building. We would just play like the multiplayer all summer long. That and like Jet Moto we got so good at Jet Moto, we're just like It's like a game that nobody remembers because like it wasn't that amazing, but it was kind of cool. It had those Wipeout vibes. Like we were doing like loops.
Yeah. Man, Jet Moto was a thing that really was crazy. I remember Battle Arena Tonshiren was the thing that I always was like, I need to be playing that for long periods of time. Sure. I don't know why I stopped playing it, but I just remember those like very specific sounds that went along with that game. It was just like that whole PS1 soundscape that came out of that console was very formative.
Yeah, I mean,
in a lot of ways.
It was very formative. Played a lot of Street Fighter. The weird PS1. Yeah, it was like so many games that like didn't survive. Like the version of Street Fighter that was kind of like Tekken, the EX plus Alpha one. That was like it's like a 3D Street Fighter. Like
with Skullomania.
Yeah, Skullomania. That's still my guy.
Oh, Skullomania was so good.
It was such a fun character to play.
Were you when you grew up in the Bronx? Were you a part of any of the arcade scenes too? Was that a thing that you had around you?
There was nothing around me that was like a scene. Like basically arcade. I mean, I did a lot of arcades, but it was like basically the laundromat. There was like X-Men Street Fighter. Had to get a couple of rounds of that. There was the pizza place, a couple of pizza places. Like there was a few like those ones that had like Cruising USA and like the cowboy game. I always forget what it's called. Where it's the like Lone Ranger or something. And then there was a Nathan's like in Yonkers.
Ooh.
And like we're kind of like basically a 5-minute drive from Yonkers, and we would just like we'd go there. We wouldn't even like eat anything like because it was Nathan. It was not good. But then we would like we'd hit up the arcade, and my mom would give us like $20 and like be like go crazy, and we'd get like 20 minutes out of it, or like half an hour because like you just burn through your money so fast. But it was the most fun ever. Like when you get to do that for like a hot second, and like they had all the greats like Time Crisis and House of the Dead. Just like it was. I definitely played those. Never anything in a competitive sense. It was just like finding something where you can like basically waste your money very quickly.
Yeah.
But have a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, we got pretty good at House of the Dead.
Most of the stuff that was in that game when you first started to play it, it was such a like they were trying to G you for your money so hard.
They were good at that. Oh, Area 51, totally. Like shooters were amazing. I love the shooters. I would play Time Crisis and I beat it a few times at that point because like it was possible. That game did not feel like it was trying to cheat you. Time Crisis, like. Right. You can, because of the ducking mechanic was so clutch,
Yeah. You're totally right on that. I totally forgot about the ducking thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can tell which games were trying to get you, and then the other ones that were like felt kind of fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember Turbo being one of those games that I remember not being fair. It felt like they were always trying to like run you off the road, or like Spy Hunter was trying to like always run you off the road.
Sure.
And take your last bits of money. But
yeah,
it was a good time to kind of grow up, especially it's funny because I don't think a lot of people, I wonder how this played out outside of New York, and I'm sure it was similar, but it felt like, if you didn't have those kind of larger arcades, you were finding yourself in the pizza shop or in the, in the bodega or in any of the other places that had an arcade machine, and you were, getting your gaming fix within those small spaces. I wish that there was a conversation about how that kind of transpired and was the last vestiges of the actual like arcade scene. And I know that some people have talked about it, but I haven't seen an actual like full on like documentary about stuff like that. It would be cool to see.
Yeah, it's kind of a lost social space, basically.
Yeah. So I want to fast forward a little bit to a little bit older Yussef. When did you start to write about games, or when did you start to think about the process of lending your voice in a literary way to the game space?
So I studied kind of cinema studies at school and college, and didn't really. I parlayed that into production and getting into animation, getting into motion graphics. But I also did a lot of essay writing just because it was a multidisciplinary major, and there wasn't much of a film production department at my school. It was a lot more English and critique. So I got a lot of practice writing about stuff and writing about film. and I didn't get to use it for a good 8-9 years after, and I just had, I think it was kind of a slow build up where I was getting more interested in games and buying more of them, and at that point I had a PC that I had built, and I was just getting really invested in talking and thinking about them, and I was on a couple of forums, and I think I was just inspired by seeing just good pieces online and people writing seriously about games, and I hadn't seen that kind of stuff before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of it kind of kicked me in the butt to try it myself and try and mess around in that area and see what I can do. And I just started writing in blogs or my own blogs, or writing. I would write stuff in the forums. I would just take up people's time, just writing page-long forum messages about stuff, and just that kind of light practice and dipping my foot into things. And it really was this slow build-up. Nothing happened overnight. I was just writing because I enjoyed the art of it, and I enjoyed the feedback and basically getting to share how I thought about something and getting a bounce back and getting a response. Excuse me. And that just kept going. And at some point, Medium came along, and it kind of gave some of the blog writing a bit more of a professional luster. It looks like you're writing a real thing. And I was writing, so from that I wrote a few pieces for Ontological Geek, which sadly I just saw they are not publishing pieces anymore. But they were the first place I wrote for, and then I just from there just started writing for a few other sites. I met Austin Walker from Waypoint and Vice at some of the game festivals. I went to Indiecade a bunch in New York because it's in New York. I don't have to travel. I love that. And it was a good vibe. It's not really going on, at least not to the extent that it was before anymore. But it was right. You could anyway show up. It felt friendly to amateurs and people who were just interested in games, and you can play all the latest indies and meet and go to developer talks, and it was a really rich culture. And I had met Austin there or at another event, and he dug some of my blog writing, and he kind of gave me a big push to he put me up on Waypoint pretty early on in my career. Mm-hmm. And just from there, it just bit by bit, article by article, I just kept growing my body of work and getting better at it, getting better at writing efficiently and finding a good thesis, a good point to what I wanted to talk about, and not meander too much. And so I'm less. I think at this point, I'm probably less on the enthusiast, in all the game forums, kind of, subscribing to all the magazines, building PCs level. I'm a little more old and tired, but I still I don't get tired of the writing part of it. I still really like that, and I feel I found a good voice to write with. The problem is just I don't make time anymore. I'm just I am fitting it where I can, but it's a struggle because the show is so demanding. But I'm writing a column for Unwinnable, and they're really good people. They're just
love them.
Yeah, they're just operating out of the internet and releasing this monthly PDF where they just a bunch of a really diverse group of writers kind of all put forward whatever they want to talk about, basically about games and pop culture. So I have pretty free reign to write about whatever I want. I just the last month I wrote a piece about Evangelion and watching it, growing up watching it, and watching it now 20 years later or whatever. And then I just wrote a piece about this podcast, Mortal Podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No.
It's this.
What's that about?
It's basically, you probably like this. It's this, since you're a Mortal Kombat fan, this comedian and kind of video director, this guy Ben Meckler in LA. Like, he basically just loves Mortal Kombat and knows all the lore. And he just every episode he will describe the lore of a single character to a random guest, like who usually doesn't know anything about Mortal Kombat. And,
oh my god, this sounds fantastic!
Yeah, so like he just did a whole, like, the seasons are based on, I think, the games. Like, the first season was like all the Mortal Kombat 1 characters, and now he's doing like, I guess, after that. But yeah, it's so funny because he's just like there because the lore is crazy. The lore is so weird. Because everyone's dying, coming back to life, becoming dead, getting reborn. Like, oh man, it's wild. And he like sticks to it. He does not break form. So I was just writing about that and like how I thought it was interesting, and like how lore and people who like especially people who like stream lore are these like secondary storytellers, and they kind of like add to the narrative of the original game because like they're putting in this effort to like turn it into this, to weave it into this like entertaining story.
Right.
So yeah, like I'm just like writing about whatever comes to my mind for this magazine for Unwinnable, and yeah, I write for like other places like Bullet Points, another small small kind of like monthly publication, and I try and write for Austin and Vice whenever I can, but those tend to like be when I have like a good chunk of time to like devote to research and planning and stuff, which hasn't been too frequent, but I try and I'm talking to Austin. We'll see. I'm always hopeful.
I want to dig into that actually after the break, because two of the pieces that you've written, and you are one of my favorite writers in the game space. But there are two specific pieces that I want to dig into right after the break about your Cuphead piece and your piece about Fortnite and hip hop culture and how the two shall kind of meet.
All right.
Cool beans. So we're going to take a quick break. Everybody at home, make sure you got some water. Make sure you're hanging out. We have Yussef Cole rocking with us in Chicago. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Spawn on Me podcast. I'm your host, Khalif Adams. Thank you so much for hanging out during the break. We are rocking with my man, my mellow, Yussef Cole, coming through in the clutch, hanging out with us here in Chicago. So we talked a little bit about some of your writing. We talked a little bit about some of the pieces that you had done. There are two of them that stick out in my mind immediately when I think about your work because of some of the stuff you talked about a little bit before the break. You do some fantastic research when it comes to building out the stories that you are looking to share with the rest of the world. The piece I know that a lot of folks think about is the Cuphead piece, where you talked about the connection between minstrel imagery and how Cuphead has kind of used that to be the foundation for that game.
Sure.
And you as a visual artist, I'm sure that you have gone through and understand the languages and the nuance behind that, and it displayed itself masterfully within the piece that you shared. What's the process look like for you when you have one of those really meaty pieces? Like when you think about what the things are that you want to write about, is it coming from just the kind of news of the day that influences where you want to start that process? Or is it something that you've seen and thought about for a long period of time and you're like, this is a thing that I've now seeing this connection happen, and I want to bridge the gap between the folks who may not have the knowledge and the knowledge that I have to bring that story to life?
Yeah. I sometimes depends on the piece. Well, sometimes it's serendipitous, where I know like I wrote a review for Detroit Become Human for Waypoint, and luckily I had everything I wanted to talk about I had already read. So I was like, oh yeah, I know what I'm talking about. Because I was like doing research for another piece that was about like Detroit, and it was like I just read a book about Detroit and like a couple of books about the like the history of segregation in Detroit and like the housing crisis and the collapse of the industry there. And I was like, oh, I have all these quotes I can use for this piece. Done. And it almost never works out that way with Cuphead. It basically it started with, made a few comments on Twitter. Some of this, and I read, I'd read like some writing to that effect, like Samantha Blackman, I think, had written a piece about when she saw it in the preview, just like, oh, this, raising some red flags. We'll see what happens when the game comes out, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, so I was playing it and kind of and thinking along those lines, but not really like having a concrete base at that point. And then Stu Horvath over at Unwinnable, he was like, I see you're tweeting about this. Like, I would love for you to write a piece. And I was like, okay. Like, it was kind of like he basically, which is my favorite kind of interaction, by the way, like for an editor to just like, not just like tweet, like, we need diverse writers to write something cool about, like specifically like, like giving me this brief and this job that I could sink my teeth into and like kind of, and from the get, from the jump, without having to like just think of a new idea on the spot. This was like, just like it was just serendipity where like I was thinking about it and he gave me the platform. And from that point, I was like, okay, if I'm going to talk about this, I need to do the research. I need to see what's out there. And I luckily have a friend who runs a theater in New York, Spectacle. Like, it's a small indie theater, and they run just very like strange and obscure movies, and he has a great encyclopedic knowledge of niche films. And I know he like also worked with these curators who are deep into like 30s animation and Fleischer animation. And so I was asking him about like some books I can read, and he recommended some of the pieces I used. And yeah, I just did the research. I read a couple of books on it. I mean, there's always more that I could do, but I think it's a matter of balancing, what is possible, like within the time frame, and getting enough of a grasp of the subject that I can make the point I want to make without stretching it, and I can, the service is, and it also doesn't become like an academic paper. There's this line that you're writing where you still want it to be entertaining and light, and easy to read. And I'm not just like showing off my sources, right? I'm not just giving people a bibliography. Like, I'm just using it to like jump off and like write and talk about what I want to talk about. And that's always something that's like, I keep in mind when I'm doing these pieces, and it's not just like a list of like block quotes, like long, lengthy block quotes of whatever I'm reading. And also it takes forever to do the research, so I can't dive that deep into it. But yeah, like for the most part, when I'm doing a piece that is research oriented, that is a subject that has a history attached to it, I like seeing how much, trying to get a handle so I can speak confidently about that history. And I think that was totally my process with Cuphead. It was my process with the Fortnite essay. Again, I was like, I had just been talking about it, and I was like, I've been chatting with Nick Capozzoli, who's at the Game Critic Circle, and he was like, yeah, like this is the crux, right? Like it's always being discussed as this legal thing, like whether or not they can, whether or not they should, and what that means culturally. I'm like, yeah, that's true. Like, and he's like, but I'm not going to write the essay. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll write it then. Like, it's like,
and to give people context, that you're writing about the pulling of black culture into this game without them being compensated for the work that they put.
Because at that point, there were a few famous cases that were popping up where Meek Mill and Alfonso Ribeiro and a few other, and like some YouTubers and like other people, like and the flossing kid, I forgot what it's called, not flossing, what's his name? Anyway,
I know who you're talking about, but I can't think of him. Yeah.
People are bringing up actually legal cases against Epic and trying to get some recognition that they were just using their moves whole cloth, and it's kind of fizzled out because the patenting like law isn't strong enough to support claims for like moves. It's really for like choreographed dances, and that kind of like. And for a lot of people in games, especially writing about it, it was like an open and shut question. And I was like, but there's more to it. Like, let's dig into it. Let's dig into why this is like, it's like why it fits into this like pattern so neatly of mainstream media, like profiting off of black art and black culture without paying it back and without recognizing it. And so, I just kind of dug into some of the background there. And there's definitely a lot of really good writing about that stuff, like tons of it, just talking about the history of rock and roll and jazz and dance. Dance is like such this incredibly wrought topic where you had things like American Bandstand. I wish I could talk more about it. It's like so fascinating where it's like, how
we have time.
Yeah.
We have time to dig into some of it.
Yeah, just like how it was so segregated and, but at the same time, the dances that were becoming popular were dances that these white dancers on American Bandstand had seen in the halls of Harlem and in the Savoy and like other places around New York, and were just copying it and putting it on display and pretending it was their own work. And then you had things like Soul Train pop up in response to American Bandstand not allowing at least like the freedom of the black guests and the artists who are on the show to dance the way they wanted to dance. And so it was this venue where they could really show off their moves, and it blew up. It was so popular. Like for me, it's kind of funny for me because like we were like I was watching Soul Train like but it was like way past its heyday. Like it was in the 80s or the late 80s and early 90s at that point. It was when I knew like Saturday morning cartoons were going to end. Because it was like, like Soul Train would come on. I was like, oh man.
It was a in between space between Soul Train and Kung Fu Flick.
Yeah. You're like, time to go outside, I guess.
Yeah, it's time to go outside. Yep. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like a lot of history that like I knew the outlines of, but it was really interesting to read about it and try and put the whole thing into context, into words, and apply it to a game that is still crazy popular. So like I really like writing those pieces, and I like that there's space for that and platforms for that. I think Waypoint is this Vice Games now. Like this, I always when I chat with Austin about potential pieces, like that's usually what I have in mind. It's like I want a piece that will kind of like make a big splash. Will stand on its own for a while, like kind of have this like longevity because there's more weight to it than it like because I have the freedom somewhat of not having this be my main career, like of writing, like where I don't need to like write like 10 pieces a day to like make rent. Like I can come at it like with the freedom and flexibility of not needing to be paid for it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I love about your pieces specifically is that they do focus sometimes on these topics that bring up and evoke these emotional responses that especially me and we in the Black community are like, yeah, we see this thing happen all the time, and no one is really addressing it or talking about it or bringing it up in the context of the, cultural phenomena that we constantly see in the games that we play and all those things. It always feels like, and this is the thing that I always kind of share out, is like, I think of Black culture as the continuous dominant culture when it comes to whatever has been hot or whatever has been new and fresh and whatever has been the kind of thing that thrusts, all entertainment in that one thing, that one box forward. What are when you're having those conversations with folks who are in both games media and outside of games media, it feels like both hip hop and Black culture specifically, have always been pigeonholed into these really weird and kind of very niche spaces. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to ask folks who are writing about that, where do you think that we're being missed in a lot of the conversations? Like, I feel like there's so many pieces of our culture that only get focused on, but there are so many parts of it that is so vast that never even get mentioned. Mm-hmm. Where are some of the places that you would hope to see in the years to come, those kind of intricate and nuanced versions of Black culture kind of infuse themselves within the games that we play?
That's a really good question. Because there's so many answers. That's what's so nice about it. You know, because the culture is vast and always surprising. Like stuff that surprises me. I had seen, or I was thinking the name, that HBO show by Terrence Nance. That is a director. What is it called? Random Acts of Flyness.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes.
I was when I watched it, I was that is so cool. It's surreal. Yeah. It's got kind of a Spike Jones aspect. It's got this cultural criticism, and then just totally then a cool hip hop vibe, and it's mm-hmm. sexy and dark and exciting and weird. I was really, I was and I was surprised by it, and I like that. I like that there are I should not know the bounds of my own culture. It should be this thing where people are bringing these fresh new perspectives that will make me feel old and out of touch. That kind of stuff is great. And there's always there's also the old standbys, more Afrofuturism, that I'll always get behind that. I think there's so much more depth to plunge in terms of Blackness and sci-fi and fantasy, where you have these just these cultural arenas that have traditionally kept Black voices out, and when they're in, it's kind of stripped of context, and kind of it still feels like a more homogenous voice. It doesn't feel like it's representing a diverse voice. Because it's one thing for representation in terms of bringing bringing an actor in or a character in your book, but then it's totally different when it's the person writing it behind this camera is of color and is coming, and you can see it's coming with these new ideas. So I think that last year I read An Unkindness of Ghosts, which is this awesome really dense it's not dense, but it's hard sci-fi book about a generation ship that that is traveling to find a new colony, something sort of straight out of Mass Effect, but it's also carrying with it a lot of the racist baggage of the Earth. There's a caste system, there's kind of plantation labor on it, and there's kind of basically an uprising that happens. So the author's a Black woman, and it's it makes all the difference. And then reading anything by Octavia Butler is one of my favorite authors. It's just that's always my jam. You know, I'm a sucker for that stuff.
Yeah. I'm hoping to see, and this is one of the things that I'm hoping that I can find all the people to make this thing happen at some point. But I've never seen and I've never heard, or I envision, I'm sorry, there being all those things wrapped up into black game coverage, or an outlet that does that kind of work, where all those things are fully infused into how, you know, game coverage is shared, both in the visual and audio form. You know, folks are finding out that the connections to hip hop are not just background music, but it's in the way that you view the world and things like that.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, you're kind of doing some of that work through the stuff that you're doing on Patriot Act, where you're freshening up the news and the news of the day, and the way that through Hassan's amazing comedic timing and all those things, bringing this new fresh version of, you know, the thing that you need to know this week through your work. I want to talk a little bit about like how that process has started. What was the process of you getting on Patriot Act to work with those folks, and I would definitely want to talk about the gaming episode that you had a hand in. What was the process of getting into Patriot Act with Hassan and Netflix?
It was a really lucky concurrence of people and timing. Basically, a close friend of mine who I've worked for in the past was signed on to be the creative director for like the motion graphics department, and she brought me on. She was like, "I want you to come on as the animation director and kind of help lead the team to create these episodes." She kind of got me in. Michelle Higa, she's a really talented creative director. She owns her company in New York and does a lot of really cool work. So she was the creative director of Patriot Act for the first season, and she also helped shoot a pilot that helped sell to Netflix and kind of develop the whole artistic style of the show. And I was kind of following the process of them making it, kind of putting it together, and then she kind of brought me on once it was ready to go to tape and start getting into production basically. It's both a natural continuation of the work I've done, but also a really new, a new avenue, and something I had to learn a lot of things that I was not necessarily familiar with. Most of my past work has been more traditional, freelance motion graphics, where you're making stuff for commercials or advertising or sometimes websites. But it's more of a in and out. You make a 30-second spot here, you make a 5-second web banner here, and this was a lot more. And then you never see it again because it kind of goes off to the ether. And then this show is very different because we would need to make the graphics, get it approved, and then that was just one part of it because it has to then go on the stage, and then you, and as with the team lead, you're kind of down there with the production director who's shooting Hassan on the stage and kind of framing the background and making sure everything can fit into the frame of the camera that he's shooting with. So then you then have to account for a camera capturing your graphics and the host of the show, because it's different, because not just graphics that are on a TV, it's graphics that then become part of the stage background, it's graphics that become set dressing. And so I had never created that kind of work, and at the same time I also hadn't really worked in live television, so it was learning a lot of that stuff, learning a lot of the language for that and the process. So it was a ton of learning required, a ton of studying up. But I feel at this point, after a year, pretty comfortable with it. And that was really good timing for them to do a video game episode. So I could come at it with the full force of my experience with the show. And the story behind that is they've been wanting to just do a game episode for a while. Like they know it's something that a lot of people are enthusiastic about and can generate a lot of attention. There just wasn't a good angle, and the difficulty is like because the writers and Hassan, they're not gamers. Like surprisingly, none of them play games. Like there's like a few people.
I was gonna ask you that. I was curious if Hassan was playing games.
He does not play games.
Interesting.
And so the difficulty was like, how do you talk about games in like a culture that has a lot of nuance without coming off as like an out of touch old person? Like it's just like really hard to nail that. And I'm sure we didn't fully like succeed. Like there's a lot of stuff where it's like I'm not in control of what the writers are talking about. Like I can lend as much of my expertise on games as possible, in air quotes. Like I'm missing a lot of knowledge. Like even with Fortnite, because I don't really play Fortnite. Like I'm like they're asking all these questions, and I'm like I played it like once. And like luckily there were a few people that like have played it. But yeah, like I played it enough to like know what it's about. I played it for the article, like, but I have not. I'm not a dedicated Fortnite player. But we had a few people on the staff that had, and so we were able to piece it together. And yeah,
I mean, one of the things that I when I watched the episode, like you saying that to me now, I would have never known. Like I would have never been able to tell, which to me is fantastic, because now hearing that, Hassan isn't necessarily a gamer in that space, and there may not be that many folks on staff who are doing that either. It felt like one of the things that we constantly see when we have, I'm going to throw up air quotes, outsiders kind of come into the space to talk about the thing that we know and love.
Yeah.
It feels like the nuance is never really there, and they're not giving the gravity of the industry and the people who are within it the kind of credit and due that they deserve. Having seen the full episode, I'm sure, how did you feel like? Did you feel like they kind of nailed when you started to pitch that piece to them? Do you feel like they nailed the nuance of that particular subject, and did they feel like they nailed the ability for them to kind of convey those things to folks, not necessarily outside of our circle, but to the folks that were inside of our circle?
I think they did. And yeah, to be fair, like I didn't. The idea came from like some of the news producers, like for the labor angle. But I
got it.
Like was kind of consulting on like my take on it. Like from what I had seen, and having followed like that more than a year at that point.
Right.
Excuse me. Like it was, I think they did a really good job of collecting so many disparate threads of experience and information into a 25-minute episode, like and into a package that not just people who are in the know, like for people in the industry who like are breathing this stuff day in and day out. Probably a lot of it's like, yeah, I'm familiar with this, I'm familiar with that, somewhat old news, but I think it's also digestible for people who don't play games necessarily, or play them at a very like superficial and casual level where they're not really caring about like this layoff that happened a week ago, or this layoff that happened a month ago, or like even aware of the names of the companies that make the games. Like I think that level is really important to reach, and that's what we're trying to do is try and make this almost like lighting the torches to alert like the world, like, hey, this is like a thing that actually matters, because it may seem like a frivolous job, but it's labor. It's people are producing a massive amount of culture and capital and and content that affects a lot of people and that entertains a lot of people. And they deserve to have their jobs considered labor and to be protected as such. So I think that like it was our head writer Prashant is like super dedicated, and he for the whole episode he was like, I want to make sure that we sound like we know what we're talking about. Like that we're coming from a place where like we can't really, I mean, we could be challenged in some things, but for the most, the core argument can't be challenged because we're bringing enough examples of what we mean when we talk about exploitation and crunch and the way people are kind of let out to dry or left on the side of the road when a company decides to end things. Like how that, and then to turn that into like how that might be protected if you were to unionize or to find other ways to like organize your labor and protect yourself. So yeah, I think it was pretty successful. Plus, it feels funny. Like it's the show. Yeah. The show is also a comedy show, and like trying to find jokes about it and like stuff that could get really dark. I think we were able to like balance that line fairly successfully.
The show does that really, really well. I mean, Hassan's version of comedy is biting when it needs to be biting, and also has a very deft hand when it needs to have a deft hand. So it's like you can see his comedy roots are always there, but it's always great to see him dig into a subject and have that thing be displayed in a smart and really thoughtful way. And even just on a side note, back to the production of that particular episode, it gave me a huge sense of pride to see the GWU logo so beautifully displayed underneath Hassan's feet and on the back of the stage and things like that. That was awesome. It was great to see that awesome. as being something that was integrated into the show.
Like having I have that logo on my phone, just like on a sticker on the back of my phone, like before we started working on the episode. So it was really awesome to be like, I'm just gonna put it on the floor now, like. And have that power to do that, like, because like that's what we're talking about. Like we were talking about that organization and what they were doing. So that was like such a great opportunity, and also just like because it's games, I had and like no one really knew what to do. Like I was like, oh, I'm just gonna put this there, I'm gonna put that there, I'm gonna put like Moira from Overwatch in the intro, or like this Minecraft guy popping up. So I had like this free reign of like of the backgrounds that I probably might not have had as much of if it was like a subject that the writers knew more about. Really like I was like it was me and my own playground.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time. Time has flown for this episode. Jeez. Last question for you. If you were to do another gaming episode for Patriot Act, and you were to pitch whatever idea you wanted to be the next topic of discussion for the show, what would that topic of discussion be?
The topic that I really want to talk about, but we've kind of like we've kind of like been back and forth about whether it's feasible. Is like the connection between kind of like gaming and YouTube and like the alt-right and like conservatism, and like how people are radicalized on even Discord or like Twitch and YouTube, like that kind of stuff. I feel like there's so many case studies and so many examples of where that happens. Like, and it's the problem is like how do you thread the line where you're not just like becoming or like presenting another scare tactic-y news report that's shouting about the dangers of games, because I don't think it's the games themselves. It's actually less the games and more the communities around them, and the way the internet works like these days, and the algorithms of YouTube, I think, are really like these giant unknowable constructs that are shaping culture and shaping mentalities of people. Like that we have, that's a black box, it's impossible to know like, how YouTube is recommending people like these awful conservative conspiratorial videos. And why is it so connected to games? Like it's, I think it's like it's a subject that deserves a closer look. So I would totally do an episode about that if I could. But I think it's also I understand why they might stray away from it because like they're just worried about the optics maybe.
It's hard to feel like you're doing that kind of show in a I'm not going to say a balanced way, but in a way that doesn't seem like you're trying to pick a side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like, it's like the conversation about like, should you punch a Nazi in the face? And people being like, you shouldn't punch Nazis in the face. When you're like, yo, but they're Nazis. They're not good people. Like, they're not people who you should uphold to the same standard that we already hold most people to. Like, we do live in that age of false equivalence. So that age of false equivalence is,
and I think
it's hard. It's hard to fight.
I think it's okay to pick a side, and we obviously do. Like we did with the unionization stuff. Like I'm sure the big game companies are not happy with the show. But it's also important to make sure that your argument is clear and hits the right targets. And like, I think we've largely been able to do that on the show. So I'm very happy with the decision making of like the writers and the news team. Like they know their stuff. They're like very conscientious and they work super hard. So I think that's been a really nice. It's been a nice change of kind of clientele for me, where like versus like just making stuff for ads or whatever. Like I don't really care about. It's nice having that investment on the part of everybody in the company, because everyone there is like they just want to make a really good show that's both entertaining and like educational and interesting and gets conversation started. So like, and it was really fun to be able to fit my other side of my life, games, into the show, into the format of the show, and get House talking about Fortnite.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect place to end this episode of Spawn on Me. Like, fam, first of all, thank you so much for coming through.
My pleasure.
I've been looking forward to this since we talked about it a little while ago about us getting you on the show to come through and hang out. And personally, as a person who's been a fan of your work for a long time, it brings me nothing but joy to see you doing such fantastic work that I get to ingest and watch as often as I do. And I get to be like, yo, that's Yussef doing that joint over there. That stuff that's on that stage right there. I know that cat. That's super dope. So, again, thank you so much for coming through to Chicago. It's been a long time coming. I'm happy that you're here. And tell the folks at home where they can find your work and where they can get up with you on the internet.
Sure. I am Yumeyu on Twitter. That's YOUMEYOU. And that has links to all my website and everything you need to find. And yeah, watch Patriotic this Sunday and every Sunday, except for the Sundays that we're not making it. You'll know when that is happening.
Yes,
but we have at least two more Sundays of episodes going at you. Three more coming. So
3 more
for the next month. But they're going to be dope.
Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody in Chicago, thank you again for coming and hanging out. Again, this is the only place you can find dope conversations like this in podcast form with amazing dope blackness in it and dope conversations. So make sure you're checking us out on all the podcast networks and all the places you can find Spawn on Me in your ear holes and all those wonderful places. So for now, we're going to dip out of here. We're going to go host someone else on Twitch for the folks who are listening on Twitch land. Everyone in X-Ray land and in podcast land, we will see you all next week. And we say peace. All right. Splash screen is up. Music is up. Dope. You can stop your recording.
Sure will.
The Spawn on Me podcast can be found every Tuesday on all podcast platforms and Portland Radio at xray.fm at 107.1/91.1. You can find us live every Thursday on twitch.tv/SpawnOnMe. If you want to reach out to us on the show, you can hit us up on our site, spawnonme.com, where you can find all our social media information about our Twitter, Instagram, and everything else, alongside our contact page if you want to reach out and shoot us a message or a business inquiry. Much love to you all. Thank you so much for listening every week, and we say peace.